The Home Office has refused to publish its latest figures about returnee fighters. In 2016, 1 in 8 jihadis who had travelled to ISIL's front lines faced British courts. While the government says it no longer holds the data, politicians argue the figures are deliberately being held back. Well, the former independent terrorism law watchdog says that the lack of an official legal definition of extremism makes enforcing legislation difficult.
How do you define extremism? And I think we've seen various attempts to do that. I mentioned in my last report in December that the police, when they're looking at so-called domestic extremism, as it's still called, have 3 competing definitions on the go. And although they asked for a single definition in 2012, they haven't been given one. So that is very difficult.
To discuss this in further detail, I'm now joined by Philip Ingram, former Senior Intelligence and Security Officer. Philip, evening to you.
Good evening.
The suspicion that the government is covering up the numbers, why would it do that?
I don't think the government would cover the numbers up. There's a real difficulty in being exact with the numbers because, you know, the government, people aren't booking out of the country when they go off to join these illegal organisations, and they certainly don't want to make their presence known when they come back in again. So we're relying on the intelligence networks to try and estimate the numbers that are doing it.
Is it an exaggeration to say that those who are returning are actually able to walk around free? Because surely the government's saying that they're being monitored by the security services to some degree, so they're not roaming free at all, are they? No,
those that are known are not roaming free like any normal citizen. You know, they reckon about 800, 850 people from the UK have gone out to Syria and Iraq to join so-called Islamic State. And there's estimates that are about 400 have come back again. Remember, the government has got 20 to 25,000 people on their watch list, of which they're actively following between 300 and 500 on any one particular day. And those that they deem are a risk that have come back from those war zones will be part of that group.
And many of the returnees have not been prosecuted because there's not enough evidence. This is a big problem, isn't it, for the security services? How would British prosecutors get that sort of evidence to say they have been in ISIL strongholds? It's very tough to get that sort of evidence out there, isn't it?
It's extremely difficult, and this is one of the issues that there is in dealing with terrorism. You know, the joining so-called Islamic State is prescribed. It's a prescribed organisation, so committing a crime, people are committing a crime by doing that. However, it's very difficult to be able to prove it because what the intelligence services know is not necessarily good enough to pass what the courts need to be able to achieve a prosecution. So that has caused a dilemma for years. We saw that in Northern Ireland, where the security services knew who a lot of the terrorists were, but they weren't able to get sufficient evidence to get over the evidential barrier to allow them to be prosecuted in court.
But it seems that sufficient suspicion may be enough, because ministers, some are saying even today that people should be automatically jailed. Any British jihadi who travels to terror hotspots on their return should be put behind bars. And many would say, of course, that violates the justice system. People are being found guilty until they're proved innocent.
Well, exactly, and it's a great soundbite from a politician who wants to try and increase their popularity. You know, it was tried in the 1970s in Northern Ireland. It was called internment. It didn't work. It actually stimulated more recruitment, and there were a lot of innocent people who were put where the liberty was denied from them. And we can't go back to that again. We have to look at getting things through the evidential system and through the courts where prosecution can do, or remain the visibility of the intelligence services. And remember, if someone who's not actively going out and carrying out terrorist activities in the country, but they're being watched, all of their associates are being watched, the intelligence services are building up a very good network.
Yeah, of course,
remember,
sorry to interrupt, but women and children have been forced to travel to these war zones. I mean, they weren't actually caught up necessarily in the conflict, were they? What should happen to them?
Well, women and children, you know, I haven't seen any stories of them being forced to travel. I've seen lots of stories of them volunteering to go out there. And therefore, when they come back, they might not have taken part in the actual fighting, but they joined a prescribed organisation. And therefore, they should go through the judicial system where there's evidence to prove that.
Just very
briefly. But they will be in the watch list otherwise.
Philip, very briefly, from your security expertise, people are very worried about another attack from returnees coming from jihadi activity. Are we still very much at risk in this country?
We are, and the biggest threat is not necessarily just the returnees, it's those people that we don't know who are not on any of the watch lists.
Philip, great to talk to you tonight. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.